Hello everyone, welcome to Chronic Illness. Today I'm going to give you all the tips and advice I learned for surviving at university or college, or even regular high school, could be good for that. I managed to complete a university degree while having pretty severe ME/CFS, which is chronic fatigue syndrome or myalgic encephalomyelitis. This illness causes profound fatigue, both mental and physical. The mental fatigue is sometimes called brain fog or cognitive impairment, and includes impaired concentration, attention, memory, executive function, basically all the mental processes you need for study. ME/CFS also causes pain, orthostatic issues, and many other symptoms that make life difficult. Because I was so sick, it took me 10.5 years to finish my degree, but I did it with a whole lot of blood, sweat, and tears, sometimes literally. I did it and I scored pretty high marks. And now I want to share the tips I learned along the way and the things I wish I'd known in the early years. So if you have similar symptoms to me, this video should be helpful. I also recently found out that I have ADHD, inattentive type. I mention this because the cognitive symptoms of ADHD overlap a lot with those of ME/CFS. So a lot of the tips I give for brain fog will also be helpful for those with ADHD. So in no particular order, here's my advice. You know what, I'm actually going to take this hat off. The little thingy moving around is annoying me. You get the idea. Fix this up. My first tip is to register with your university's disability services and get the concessions you're entitled to. If you have a chronic illness, you're going to have a lot of sick days. You'll need extensions on assignments, special chairs, medical exemptions, things like that. And it's important to get this organised up front so that you don't have to constantly apply for adjustments throughout your term. That's a lot of paperwork, and the unis don't like this either because it clogs up their admin processes. It's better to submit all the necessary paperwork up front, then you don't have to submit new evidence for every issue you have. You just ask for the concession and it's granted. So what adjustments should you ask for? Extra time for assignments and tests is very important. With all that fatigue and brain fog, progress is slower than normal, so you need that extra time. Request recordings of your lectures. These days, I think most lectures are recorded or even done online, but some lecturers are old school and they don't record or release the recordings because otherwise students just won't show up in person, which is understandable. If that's the case, make sure you have an exemption for attending in person for those days you can't leave the house. Make sure your exams are spaced apart. Sometimes final exams for different subjects are scheduled on the same day or the next day. This is too much for us. Ask for your exams to be at a time of day that suits you best and schedule them at least a day, maybe 2 days apart, so you've got time to recover between tests. Because man, exams are brutal when you have a chronic illness, so you'll probably crash afterwards. You should also ask to do your exam in a small, quiet room, though this is usually a given for disabled students. It really helps that there are fewer distractions, you know. Request that you be allowed to eat proper food during your exam. Each exam can go for 3 or 4 hours. Usually universities allow students to bring in things like lollies and water to eat and drink, but those with chronic illness usually need more substantial food than that. Your brain burns through a ton of glucose when you're concentrating intensely, and running out of fuel will usually cause a crash. So make sure you're allowed to bring some proper food in. Of course, make sure it's nothing too loud or messy or smelly, nothing that will disturb the other students, but make sure you have access to some proper food during the exam. Make it healthy food, nothing too heavy, or it could make you sleepy. A muesli bar, a sandwich, some fruit and nuts are good options. If you have digestive problems, you can request that exams be in locations close to a toilet. Also make sure you request a supportive chair for use during classes and exams. Most of the chairs in the lecture rooms are pretty comfortable, but the ones in the labs are not. They weren't for me. My degree involved a lot of lab work, biology labs, chemistry labs, computer labs. These rooms usually had these hard, high stools that were very energetically demanding to sit on for 3 hours at a time, you know? Seriously, just the effort of holding my body up on one of those things was enough to wear me out without including the lab work. So I was allowed to use a special chair that had a padded base, a backrest, and armrests, and sitting on it was a lot more comfortable and used a lot less energy than the regular stools. Lastly, get permission to use the elevators or lifts in your building. 2. Use the damn concessions. Many people with invisible illnesses have been gaslit for years by people who tell them they're not really that unwell and that they're just lazy or weak or faking it. And after a while, you start to believe it, really internalize that. You start to think that you're not really worthy of using those supports. You feel guilty for using them. I certainly did. So for the first year or so, I didn't use a lot of the supports that I was entitled to. That first year, I didn't request a single extension for my assignments, even though it would have really helped me. I didn't insist on getting extra time in the quizzes that we did for chem each week. They were short, just 10 minutes or so, but I was entitled to an extra minute or two, and that would have made all the difference. For those classes, we had a tutorial for an hour or so and classwork, then the little quiz. What would happen was that I would burn through a lot of my brain power on the classwork. Then when it came time to do the test, I was tired and I often made careless mistakes because I was rushing to finish. I really needed that extra minute. So don't be like me. Use the assistance you're entitled to and don't let anyone, even your most distinguished professors, try to talk you out of it or brush it off. Arts and humanities teachers are pretty lenient, but science teachers are the worst for this. I saw it myself firsthand, and even my disability liaison officer said so. She told me that no staff from any other faculty pushed back on granting adjustments like the scientists did. I think it's because of that trained skepticism. You're like, I need an extension on this assignment. And they're like, I'll believe you if you provide a 1,000-word essay arguing your case with at least 3 peer-reviewed sources as evidence. Not really, but you get the idea. You must advocate for yourself and insist that you be given the supports that you're due. 3. Avoid stairs whenever possible. When moving about the campus, try to find routes that avoid stairs and hills and use the elevator whenever possible, even if you feel up to using the stairs at the time. It's better to walk a longer distance on flat ground than it is to take a shortcut that involves stairs, within reason. Going up a flight of stairs can have a big impact on a spoonie. Not only is it hard on your muscles, it spikes your heart rate and can set off POTS or orthostatic symptoms. It also just needlessly uses up energy that you're going to need for class. Speaking of my last point about actually using the supports, when I first started uni, I often didn't use the lifts when I should have. I felt self-conscious. I worried that people would think I was just lazy or that staff would get mad at me, especially because I didn't look disabled. I would feel intimidated by the sign on the lift that said staff only. So one time I walked up 4 flights of stairs at once. 4. What was I thinking? I was absolutely exhausted before I even started my 3-hour lab. I learned my lesson after that though. After that, I always used the lifts. And you know what? No staff member ever confronted me about it. They just smiled at me and left me alone. So use the lifts. 4. Apply for a disabled parking permit. I did the first year or so of my degree without a parking permit. I had to either take the train and bus, which was a very long trip, or I had to drive and park blocks away on hilly ground and walk to the campus carrying my big heavy textbooks. I cannot tell you the difference it made to my symptoms when I got my parking permit and was able to park close to my classrooms. I arrived in class fresher and had less fatigue when the day was over. There's no cost to parking in disabled spots either, at least not where I live. So if you're on low income, and you probably are, that'll save you some money in parking fees, Having your car nearby is handy for a few reasons. Not only does it cut down your walking distance, but it gives you a place to stash your heavy items that you only need for a portion of the day, so you don't have to carry all your stuff around for the whole day. It's also a little escape pod where you can rest between classes. I kept a little travel pillow and blanket in my car, and I would put the seat all the way back and just lie down for a while in between classes. Sometimes I would properly sleep, which really helped. In winter, I would use the car to warm up. I'd run the engine for a few minutes and blast the heater. My car was a little climate-controlled refuge when I needed to rest. Now, if your doctor is reluctant to issue a permit, but you do need one, try asking for a temporary permit for just a few weeks or months. These are usually given for people with temporary restrictions like a broken leg, things that will heal up in a couple of months. Your doctor will be more likely to grant a permit if it's temporary, and afterwards you can report back how much it benefited you, and they might be willing to give you a long-term one. That's what happened with me. Back to point number 2, use the dang permit. Don't be like this idiot and not use it out of guilt and then collapse at the shops. Yeah. Speaking of rest breaks, my 5th tip is to scout out all the best sleeping spots on campus. When I'm really fatigued, I can't sit up. I need to be properly lying down, or at least reclining deeply, in order to rest my torso and body. Even when I couldn't sleep, usually because I'd had too much caffeine, I needed to lie down between classes to rest. For this, I investigated the best locations. Apart from my car or one of the lawns, fine in summer but not when it's cold or wet, there were 2 locations that I loved. One was a couch in what was called the women's room. It was a room just for women to hang out in, but hardly anyone used it, so I usually had it to myself or with just one other person. It was really cozy with little creature comforts, and it had a big comfy couch that I often rested on. The other place was the beanbag room. This was a big area filled with large rectangular beanbags made for lounging. Oh, I'm cold and my teeth are chattering. Ugh. I'm like fighting the shakes, the like cold shivers, but I don't want to put the heater on because it's loud. It'll make a noise. Okay, I've got to power through. Rub my hands. Oh, I should have got a heat pack. Oh. Okay, back to it. The beanbag room. Okay, yeah, this was a big area filled with large rectangular beanbags, just the right size for a human to lounge on. If I could get 2 beanbags, one as a mattress and one as a blanket, that was ideal. But usually there were a lot of people wanting beanbags, so you could only use one at a time. Usually I would lie on the padded bench chairs or on the carpeted floor and put the beanbag over me, because I was usually cold and the foam in the beanbags is good insulation. That's a good tip there. Keeps the heat in. Just make sure to have your feet sticking out or your bag right there with you, otherwise someone might accidentally take your beanbag or even sit on you. I nearly got sat on one time. I was half asleep and I heard someone say in surprise, "There's someone under there." After that, I made sure that people could see I was there. Speaking of locations, select your study location carefully. When you're not in class but you've got work to do, you'll usually go to the library or whichever building has those little study desks. University libraries are usually huge, mine was at least, and so there were lots of options of where to sit. I always went to this one area of the library that was my favourite. Firstly, it was on the floor designated to silent study, not a sound. Very important for the distractible or fatigued brain, not to have to hear other people talking and making noise. It was also close to the toilets, but not so close that I would be distracted by all the people coming and going and the noise of the door and the hand dryer, that sort of thing. It was also close to the water bubbler and the hot water station, little kitchenette area. I need to drink a lot of water. I would also drink a lot of tea when I studied. Green tea is my favourite, and studying is better with a cuppa. I brought tea bags and a little thermos with me, just a small, lightweight one, and that way I could make tea at my desk and not have to get up for every cup. One thermos made about 3 cups of tea. It was also in a section of the building that was a bit warmer, since I feel the cold. The places where the vents were sometimes blasted cold air, especially in summer, too cold. The vents also made a noise, so I avoided them. The view and the lighting were best there too. My campus was full of trees and ponds and little streams, which helped to relax me when I was stressed. I could look out the window at the beautiful trees and the ducks waddling around, and I had natural light. Some areas of the library had no windows, so there was only fluorescent lighting, which contributed to my headaches because of the glare. I do much better with natural light, so I picked a spot near the windows. So don't just take any old desk if you can help it. Have a look around and choose the area that suits you best. The next tip is to manage your temperature. Staying warm on campus was something I really struggled with. I naturally feel the cold a lot, and people with ME/CFS or illnesses that cause dysautonomia often find that their bodies struggle with temperature regulation. It's usually not hard to stay cool. Most campuses are air conditioned, and if you sit near an AC unit or a vent, you can usually stay nice and cool in summer. But staying warm is harder. While they set the AC warmer in winter, it often wasn't warm enough for me, and there were no real heaters you could get close to get really toasty. I spent many a cold, miserable day on campus. It didn't matter how many layers I wore, sometimes I just couldn't get warm enough, especially if I got slightly wet from the rain. Eventually though, I figured out how to stay warm. Of course, you want to dress warmly, some thermal layers helps, thick socks, a good coat, that sort of thing. But if, like me, you need an external heat source, there are things you can do. You can bring a heat pack from home. Later in my degree, I always brought a couple of little disposable heat packs with me. These are lightweight and you can stick them to your body and they'll put out warmth for several hours. You could use an electric heat pack or microwavable wheat bag, but these are quite heavy, so you'd only want to bring them if you don't have to walk far, or if you've got a locker or an office you can leave them in so you don't have to carry them far. If you don't have one, you can make an emergency heat pack out of a hand towel, a plastic bag and a microwave. I already made a video explaining how to do it and all about heat packs and staying warm, so I won't take any more time up going into it here. I'll link the video in the description box and that will tell you all of your heat pack options. If your hands are cold or if you're just desperate, running your hands under some warm water can help. In our library, some of the women's toilets had hot water taps and some didn't. I investigated which was which, and on cold days, I always went to the ones with the hot water. Hot hand dryers also help. I would sometimes put my whole body under the hot air to help me warm up when no one else was looking. Number 8. Cut out excess sensory input using earplugs and tinted glasses. This is a good one for those with ADHD or autism, or anyone who struggles with excess noise and light. Photosensitivity is something that people with ME/CFS often struggle with, and mine was particularly bad whenever I had a headache, which was a lot of the time. Coloured glasses, like these ones that I'm wearing, they really help to cut down glare. They need to be a warm colour, pink or yellow or amber, as this produces light of a longer wavelength, which is gentler on the eyes. Blue blocking glasses are also good. Similarly, excess noise can really impede concentration, and your brain will have to burn through a lot more cognitive energy trying to filter it out all the time. I wish I had known about this one earlier. I remember being in the computer lab for my statistics subject and just not being able to concentrate. There was a lot of maths and complex instructions involved, very cognitively demanding stuff, and I literally could not even read the instructions unless I put my fingers in my ears. I would have to lift my arms to block my ears in order to even understand the question I was reading. Otherwise, the background chatter was too distracting. Overwhelming even. I managed to complete the subject, but in later years, I discovered how much wearing earplugs, or even better, noise-cancelling headphones, could help with that brain fog. Once I realised how much it helped, I would wear my noise-cancelling earbuds during class and I could concentrate so much better. I was still able to hear any instructions from the lecturer, but it cut out a lot of the background noise that was so distracting. Be sure to run it by your lecturer before you do, otherwise it's rude to wear them while they're trying to teach, you know? Looks like you're not listening. So I asked my lecturer's permission and explained to her why I was wearing them and assured her that I was not listening to music during the lecture, and she was perfectly happy for me to wear them. By the way, I have a video about this stuff, which I'll link. Bonus tip, if you have ADHD or autism and you're not actively taking notes, use a discreet fidget toy. It will really help you focus and help to relieve that restlessness so you can concentrate better. Actually, I just had a memory. I came to class early with a friend of mine. We both were disabled, both had chronic illnesses, and we got to class a few minutes early, and so we started looking through the work, reading what we had to do in the tutorial. And then everyone, like the room was empty, right? It was just her and me there. And then everyone came into class, and a minute or two later, when everyone was sitting in the class and there was chatter, my friend turned to me and said like, "Oh, I suddenly can't concentrate." And I was like, me too. Like I could read the instructions a few minutes ago, but once there was noise and movement in the room, I just couldn't, it was so much harder to concentrate on it. So I just remember that as like a really obvious example of how that sensory overload really taxes your ability to concentrate. Number 9. This one's probably applicable to any student, not just those who are disabled. That is to voice record your notes so that you can listen to them at times you don't have enough energy to work on more demanding tasks. Pretty much all mobile phones these days come with a voice recording app, and if yours doesn't, you can easily download one for free. You want to record your summarised notes, as this removes filler and takes a lot less time and energy to record and listen to compared to, say, listening to a whole lecture. Once you have it recorded, you have something you can listen to when you're too tired to read or write, and even when you're not focusing intently on it, you're still passively absorbing that information. It's also useful when you have a bit of time to kill, say when you're on the train, waiting at a doctor's office, driving somewhere, as long as you can still drive safely when you're listening. When you do have the energy to read over your notes, playing the recording at the same time so that you're taking in the information through your eyes and your ears will help you learn it better. You'll also be able to set the speed faster or slower, depending on your preference, repeat sections over again, add bookmarks and things like that. It's a really good study method. Number 10 is to use caffeine responsibly. If you have problems with fatigue, you probably use caffeine to get through your day. Some spoonies can't tolerate caffeine, but those who can easily end up overusing it out of necessity or desperation. I certainly did. To be clear, using caffeine and stimulants to get through the day is not recommended for those with ME/CFS. It's not safe. The energy that you get from caffeine is a kind of false energy. It's energy you borrow from the future and it has to be paid back. And for those with chronic illness, the interest rate is astronomical, loan shark level. Caffeine will mask your fatigue and interfere with pacing, since you won't be able to tell when you need to rest. Then when it wears off, you'll get a big crash and feel horrible. Doing this every now and then probably won't do much harm, especially if your illness is not super severe. But doing it consistently over the long term can cause tremendous harm to your body and turn your mild CFS into a severe case. So if you can possibly avoid relying on caffeine and stimulants, do so. If you can manage without it, or if you have other things that help you, do that. But here's the thing. This is the real world. Sometimes going without isn't an option. For me, doing uni without caffeine was not an option. It was not possible. My fatigue was so severe that I could not do a single lab, a single lecture, a single tutorial, a single task without using caffeine to do so. I could not function without it. No amount of pushing through could make me be able to do it. I was already pushing my absolute hardest, even with the caffeine. I would have caffeine, push through class, sob like a baby, then collapse somewhere exhausted and sleep for a little while. Then I would get up, maybe cry again because I felt so awful, take more caffeine and drag myself to the next class. I knew I was pushing my body way too hard, but I didn't have any other option, so I kept going. I did this for several years, gradually making my illness worse and worse until I had to apply for a break from my studies because I couldn't go on. I had done so much damage, it ended up being 4 years before I was able to return to my degree, to even be able to do a single subject. I'm telling you this so that you won't do the same thing and destroy your health the way I destroyed mine. I was just lucky that I was able to recover. I could have done permanent damage. Long story short, caffeine is a double-edged sword, so please be careful about how much caffeine or stimulants you're using. Don't use them heavily like I did if you can possibly help it, and just know the risks involved if you do. If you can't complete your studies without abusing stimulants, you need to change strategies. Either get more help from other people or take on fewer subjects, something like that. And if you need to use caffeine, use the lowest possible amount you can get away with and take a break from it whenever possible. Try to have a few caffeine-free or low caffeine days a week and take a longer break in between semesters to let your body adjust back to baseline. That way, when you do drink caffeine again, your body will be more sensitive to it and you won't need as much to get the desired effect. It helps if you can tightly control the amount of caffeine you're getting, which is hard to do if you're relying on coffee. When I first started uni, I didn't like the taste of coffee, so I never drank it. Instead, I used no-dose caffeine pills for energy. I was debating talking about these in this video because of their potential for misuse, but I decided I would because they actually allow you to use less caffeine than you would get with a coffee. The problem with coffee is that you don't know how much caffeine you're getting in each cup. If you order an espresso from a cafe, each shot has about 100 milligrams of caffeine. But that's not exact. It could be 80 milligrams, it could be 120 milligrams. It always varies and you have no way of knowing how much you're getting. A medium coffee, so 2 shots, is probably at least 200 milligrams of caffeine, and a large, at least 300 milligrams at once. That's a lot. Way too much for anyone struggling with fatigue. Instant coffee has the same problem. It's got a bit less in it than like a cafe coffee, less caffeine, but you still don't know how much you're getting. If you opt for a Coke or an energy drink, the back of the can will tell you the exact milligrams of caffeine in it. But keep in mind that energy drinks contain other stimulants that could have unpredictable effects on your body. If you've got POTS, which many with chronic illness do, they can wreak havoc on your heart, so they're not always a good option. That's where no-dose comes in. The advantage of using caffeine in pill form is that you can control the precise amount you're getting. One pill is 100 milligrams exactly. At first I would take a whole pill, but then I realized I could just take half a pill, which is 50 milligrams, or a quarter of a pill, that's 25 milligrams. It's not a lot. And it's actually much safer than drinking coffee and much cheaper too if you do it that way. If you want a hot drink, you can always order a decaf or hot chocolate or something. I drank a lot of hot chocolates in those early years. Later I started to enjoy coffee, so I would order one of those, but when I just needed a small amount of caffeine, I'd use the pills. Hopefully you can see that taking no-dose can actually be better for a spoonie than having a coffee, and people will freak out when you tell them you take a no-dose to get through class. But it's no different or worse than getting your caffeine from a drink. It kind of makes me mad actually, because like people have 3 or 4 coffees a day and that's way more caffeine than I was having in my no-dose, you know? Like people would say, oh, you can't take caffeine pills. And I'm thinking, okay, so help me then. If you want me to consume less caffeine, why aren't you helping look after me? Why aren't you doing anything to lighten my load? In those early years, my loved ones did very little to take care of me in my illness, so I was forced to rely very heavily on caffeine. It wasn't until I had support in those later years that I was able to do uni without abusing stimulants. Anyway, I'm ranting now. Last point about caffeine, I found that drinking green tea instead of coffee was a gentler way to get caffeine in. Tea, especially green tea, contains L-theanine, which can improve cognitive function while also promoting relaxation. It also contains compounds that cause the caffeine in green tea to be released more gradually into the bloodstream. For me, it just feels a bit gentler, more mellow, and I don't get that spike and crash that I would get from a strong coffee or a no-dose. Those tend to hit your system pretty hard and fast. Tea also has less caffeine than coffee, around 30 to 40 milligrams per cup, but keep in mind if you're having several cups, it can add up to the equivalent of a coffee or a no-dose. But on low caffeine days, I found that just 1 cup of green tea was enough to give me just a little bit of energy and also to prevent that caffeine withdrawal headache. Wait, actual last point on this topic. If you can't or don't want to use caffeine, I can recommend a supplement that has significantly boosted my energy levels and reduced my pain. That is barley grass powder, or as I call it, swamp juice. I can't tell you how much this stuff has helped me. It's one of the few supplements that have made a big improvement in my symptoms. It won't give you energy immediately, like caffeine, but after a couple of weeks of daily use, you should notice an improvement. I only found this stuff in the last few years of my degree, and I wish I'd found it sooner. As long as you aren't sensitive to the ingredients, take this stuff. It's full of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and anti-inflammatory compounds, and it will give you energy and reduce PEM, or post-exertional malaise. It will make your crashes less severe and shorten their duration. Then you won't need as much caffeine to get through your day. I made a whole video about barley grass, which I will link in the description. That'll tell you everything you need to know. I will just quickly mention, in regards to no-dose, too much caffeine can be harmful, even deadly. Like, you do have to take a lot for it to be deadly, but the thing is, it's possible to do if you take too much by accident. So be very careful with concentrated sources of caffeine like that. Just be careful how much you're taking. Oh, I could go for a cup of tea right now. Maybe I'll make one. Yeah. Now I want to quickly touch on food. Learn which foods work well for your body. The food you eat and the timing of when you eat it can have a big impact on your performance. Find the types of food and quantities that give you energy, or at least that don't make you extra sleepy. Aim to keep your blood sugar as level as possible, avoiding spikes and crashes. I find that grazing and snacking generally works better than eating a big heavy meal. A lunch that was too rich and fatty, like a pizza or a burger, would make me too sleepy in the afternoon. Same with anything that had too much processed carbohydrates, like a lot of white bread, pasta, or too much sugar. Usually I would bring lunch from home because I was povo, but when I did buy lunch on campus, I would go for something light and healthy like sushi, or my favourite, a salad from the kebab shop. Yes, salad from the kebab shop. I get them to layer the lettuce, tomato, tabbouleh and salad ingredients in a container, then add falafels on top since I don't eat meat, then smother it all in hummus. Without the bread, it was pretty much just vegetables and legumes, so it didn't make me feel heavy and bloated. Just remember to ask for no raw onions if you're going to be doing a group project later. Some afternoons I had to apologise to my group mates for my wicked onion breath. The food I ate also changed the effect of caffeine on my body. Caffeine on an empty stomach would sometimes hit too quickly and just make me sick. Get that tired but wired effect. But caffeine after a big meal would have no effect at all. I found it was best to have caffeine first, then immediately follow it with a healthy, medium-sized meal. That's how I got the best effect. My final spoonie tip: if there is any possibility you could have underlying ADHD or autism, get it checked out. I say this because the symptoms of ADHD can mimic those of chronic illness brain fog, and conversely, the fatigue caused by underlying illness can mask the symptoms of hyperactivity. So ADHD and autism can often go undiagnosed, especially in females. We're better at hiding it than the boys. That's what happened to me. I did my entire science degree with undiagnosed, untreated, inattentive ADHD. All my scattered thoughts, my memory problems, my zoning out, my executive function issues, I put down to either CFS brain fog or the effects of trauma, since I also have CPTSD. Some of it was caused by those things, but a lot of it was ADHD, and I didn't know it. Nowadays, I'm on medication for my ADHD, and man, if I had these meds when I did uni, I can't tell you the difference it would have made for me. How much less frustration I would have felt, how much easier it would have been to listen and focused and keep organised. So if you suspect you might be neurodivergent, investigate it and get the treatment if you need it. Okay, we're nearly at the end. I've just got 2 bonus tips for you, not illness related, but useful for any student. The first is to utilise the back of your toilet room door. Think about how many times you use the bathroom every day. If you don't have your phone with you, you'll probably be staring at the back of the door, or whichever wall or surface is in front of you. That's the perfect place to put your study notes. My bathroom door was covered in various study notes, mostly simple diagrams and charts. You don't want a big wall of text, you want to use it for things that you can glance at and get the gist of. For me, that was things like diagrams of a cell and its components, or of the process of mitosis, or a chart of common ions. I had a periodic table up so I could learn the elements. You want something that you can visually take in quickly. If your toilet is in the same room as the shower, you can hang up your notes in plastic sleeves to stop them getting affected by the steam. A good place to hang your notes is anywhere you tend to stare or where your eyes tend to land. Could be the wall in front of your desk, could be the kitchen cupboard or the fridge. You open the cupboard looking for snacks. Oh, there's a diagram of ATP synthase. Even though you're not consciously studying, you'd be surprised at how much material you'll passively absorb just by happening to see it several times a day. Bonus tip number 2. I also highly recommend creating shortcut keys and autocorrect commands in Microsoft Word. Say you've got a big word that you have to use very often in your paper. Could be a chemical name, an author's name, the scientific name of a species, or a simple formula. The sort of thing that's going to be very tedious and time consuming to type from scratch and format every time. You can set up a command in Word where you just type a few letters and Word autocorrects it to the word you want. This also works well with symbols and formatting. For example, you could set a shortcut that whenever you type H2O, it automatically makes the 2 subscript, so you don't have to go back and manually change it. I'm not going to go over how to do these things because this video is already long enough and you can easily Google how to do it. Just know that it's worth learning how because it will save you a lot of time and frustration. Okay, that's it. We made it. If you've watched until the end, thank you. I know this video is a long one, but I really wanted to share all of my study tips because I really think these can help a lot of spoonies to survive uni. I wish I had known all this stuff when I first started because it's hard. It's so hard studying with a chronic illness and we need all the help we can get. Okay, I'm gonna go now and have a rest, have a cup of tea, warm up a bit. If you have any tips that I've missed, leave them in the comments and I'll see you next time. Bye. Where did I put the hat? Oh, I'm wearing my pajama pants, but it's still not warm enough. Biology. Oh, cold.